Welcome everyone. My name is Zuzana. I work for a company called ACT, and today I would like to present you a little bit about the topic of biomethane and the possibilities for its applications for corporate sustainability targets. I would like to start with a short statement, and that is that biomethane is a sustainable energy source which is produced in Europe and which is based on the principle of circular economy. So biomethane comes mostly from feedstock which is based on waste, which else would not be used in any other way. It is produced in Europe, in European facilities, if we are talking about Europe, of course. You are sure that it's not produced in Russia or in any other country. And it's based on the principle of circular economy. So that means you get to use the waste that else would not be used in any other way. What I would like to talk about today, first, if you guys don't know us, I will give you a little bit of a introduction into our company, so what we do and where we are. In the next chapter, I want to take you through a little bit through the legislation that is touching upon the climate and energy agenda, and I will bind it together with the voluntary standards for corporates. The third part will be about GHG emissions and scopes 1, 2, 3, which for sure all of you are familiar with, but just a little bit of a intro into that. In the fourth part, I will talk about energy certification. And then I will bind that together with the international corporate climate standards. So how these certificates for renewable energy play with that. And the last part, which is something which is for sure interesting for you, what you can get from this presentation is that will show you an example of impactful claims that you can make with the use of biomethane or any other sort of renewable energy and energy certificates. So we are ACT, me and Andreas, who's sitting next to me. We are a global company. We are a provider of market-based sustainability solutions. We help organizations when it comes to corporates, utilities, energy companies to hit their sustainability targets. We were based in 2009 in Amsterdam in a living room of one of the guys who started the company. And until now, we grew into a company of almost 350 people. We are now in 3 continents, in Europe, in the US, and in Asia. And throughout the time, we really developed from being a provider of carbon solutions to being a provider of now also renewable energy solutions, energy efficiency, and carbon projects. So these are our key markets. We focus on, as I said, renewable energy, emissions and emission cuts, energy efficiency, and renewable fuels. Lately, we also started adding sustainability products, such as plastic credits. But today is going to be mainly about renewable energy, because I'm going to talk about biomethane mainly. So in this area, ACT provides energy certificates. These are certificates for electricity and renewable gases, such as biomethane or hydrogen. We also provide energy purchase agreements for power as well for gas. And I have to start as my background is environmental lawyer, so I have to start with the legislation. It basically all started in 1992 in Rio, where the countries of the world signed up for the UNFCCC. So that stands for United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. In that agreement, they basically said they're going to cut the emissions because they recognize that climate change is an issue and it's going to be an issue of growing importance. Until 1997, though, there were no concrete pledges. But in 1997, the signatories of UNFCCC signed up for the Kyoto Protocol, in which they put numbers of on these pledges. So every country signed up for a specific number target of emission cuts. And then we hop to 2015, which for sure everyone know that we got our Paris Agreement, which is a document based on the UNFCCC, but it's much more ambitious. The targets are much more stringent and much more concrete as well. On the Paris Agreement, we now in Europe have built the European Climate and Energy Strategy. So I would mention here just the European Green Deal, which was accepted in 2020, and that gave the framework for the well-known Fit for 55. And that also gave us climate and energy targets for year 2030, with the goal of being a first climate neutral continent by 2050. What's interesting for corporates is that since 2014, we have a non-financial disclosure directive, which basically says that the biggest companies in Europe have to report on their sustainability measures and on their carbon emissions. In 2021, the European Commission accepted the proposal for a new non-financial reporting directive, which is going to be called the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD. And that basically enlarges the portfolio of companies that have to report on sustainability and climate measures. And it also gives a little bit more concrete framework on what needs to be reported and how. All these pieces of legislation were during the time translated into voluntary standards. So here I'm giving you kind of like a typical typical kind of scenario of what companies and corporates follow. Some companies choose to follow different protocols, but this is kind of like the typical scenario of what we are seeing with our clients, that how they're really doing their sustainability business. So they start with measuring, because you need to have a benchmark for the future reductions. That they often do with a GHG protocol. They set targets with SBTI, which is the basically the only protocol now in the world which is aligned with Paris Agreement. So it's based on the target that Paris Agreement gives us, and it gives concrete targets to corporates in order to reach the 1.5 degrees target of Paris Agreement. Then they source renewable electricity with RE100. Also, RE100 helps them to set targets for renewable electricity. So RE100 is just for electricity. And then they disclose and make all this information public via CDP, which stands for the Carbon Disclosure Project. I will touch upon some of these standards a little bit later. I think what maybe should be made clear is one buzzword that we've been hearing around a lot lately, and that's net zero. Net zero doesn't really have a standardized definition for now, but SBTI, so the Science Based Target Initiative, came up with their own definition. So here I'm showing you what SBTI understands under net zero. And they understand it as a long-term ambition. So it's not really a target, it's a roadmap. So first you start with your benchmarking, and you end up with your ultimate target, which would be the net zero according to SBTI definition. The target is really to eliminate nearly all emissions from your corporate facilities and from your production facilities. That means 90 to 95% by 2050, and 2050 is the latest year that you can reach your net zero target. The emission cuts needs to be done across the whole value chain. As I said, the SBTI has targets that are aligned with Paris Agreement, and they're based on science. And what also SBTI says, that any unavoidable emissions, we call them residual emissions, that you end up with at the end of this process or during the process of reduction, need to be neutralized with atmospheric carbon removal. So just to make it a bit shorter, you first create your near-term and long-term targets. The near-term you have for the period of 5 to 10 years. The long-term target is then going until 2050. During the roadmap, you focus on rapid and deep emission cuts. The organizations under SBTI standard should halve their emissions by 2030. That's one of the milestones during the roadmap. And what SBTI recommends is to go beyond, so-called beyond your value chain. And that means that when you're reducing, you should also engage your company in carbon removal somewhere else to reduce emissions also in other countries, not just where you have your facilities or production. Now, just shortly about scope 1, 2, 3, because you for sure all know these. Scope 1, which is something that biomethane is a good solution for, are your direct emissions. So these are typically, just to give you an example, emissions from your boiler in your facility or in your office that takes natural gas from the gas grid, burns it, and creates heat to heat up the office, for instance. It can also be furnaces, flares, any other facility that you as a company own or control, and there are emissions coming from this facility. Another part of scope 1 is also mobile combustion. So those are vehicles that your company owns, so not that they rent them, or it doesn't include public commuting, for instance, but these are really the cars, the vehicles, the trucks that you own and control as a company. Scope 2 are emissions that stem from purchased energy. So typically, these are emissions that are produced during the production of electricity that you then take from the grid and you use it in your office, for instance. These emissions can be very well covered by either PPAs or guarantees of origin in Europe. So those are green claims for electricity taken from the grid, through which you can claim that the electricity is renewable. And scope 3, we already heard a lot about scope 3 today. These are really the emissions that are the hardest to tackle. In many cases, they create more than 90% of all emissions. For us as ACT, for instance, our scope 3 is really our 87% of our emissions, which is mainly due to our fuel business. So these are emissions that stem from activities that are from sources that are neither owned or controlled by your company. A little bit about renewable energy certificates. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the concept, but I will again show it on an example of Europe. So in the European Union, we have Renewable Energy Directive, which in its Article 19 gives a framework, so legal framework for the issuance and usage of renewable energy certificates. In Europe, these are called GOs, guarantees of origin, and they are issued on both electricity and renewable gases, so biomethane and these days also hydrogen. We have different systems around the world, but more or less they work always the same. So you as a electricity or renewable gas producer, which comes from renewable source, can have GOs issued on every megawatt hour of power that you produce, and you put it into the common grid. So that's either electricity grid for electricity or gas grid for renewable gas. Once you have this certificate, you can sell it to someone who wants to make the green claim. Once you sell the certificate is cancelled in a registry which are established by member states in the EU. And that basically gives you the right to claim the renewable value of the electricity or the gas that you took from the grid. So then you can claim that this 1 megawatt hour or this 100 megawatt hours that you used in your facility are green. What's important is that these registries control the issuance and the cancellation of the statements, so no one else can claim the same claim of energy, and that prevents double counting of the renewable energy into other portfolio of other companies. So in Europe, we have these guarantees are called guarantees of origin, issued for electricity and gas. In the UK, we have REGOs and RGGOs. These are renewable energy guarantees of origin and renewable gas guarantees of origin. In the US, we have renewable energy certificates, RECs, and also that's quite a new thing, but in the US, we also have renewable thermal certificates, RTCs, which are issued on biomethane injected to the grid in the US. And what is actually biomethane, you might wonder? How it's generated, what makes it green? So biomethane is a renewable gas, which has the same quality as a natural gas that you find in your grid. So the gas that you take to your household and you cook your meal with it in the evening, that's the natural gas. You can replace it with biomethane, which is injected to the grid. Biomethane is generated from biosources. These we call feedstock. We have different types of feedstocks, but lately the best kind of feedstock that we see is waste. So anything that basically does not have any use can be put into digester, and then it can rot there and create the methane. In Europe, historically, mainly in Germany, we have or energy crops used to be a big part of the feedstock portfolio here. So that means plants that are targeted just to be produced biomethane from. Recently, thanks to changes in legislation and different or like increasing standards in sustainability, we are moving away from using energy crops for biomethane, and we're really going into the area of waste, make use of waste. And that means bio-waste from your household, that means waste from animal agriculture, such as manure, or waste from plant agriculture. So what you do with this feedstock, you put it all in a digester, which is a facility which has like a round cylinder. You let the digestate to digest, so to rot. That emits methane, and then you capture the methane through the cylinder, basically. That gives you biogas, which is a raw gas that has 45 to 65% of methane in it. In order to put it into the natural gas grid, you need to upgrade the biogas. So you cannot use it as of now and just put it into the grid because it doesn't have the quality of the natural gas in the grid. So you upgrade, which means that you clean the biogas, you get rid of water, some CO2, and you end up with a basically almost pure methane, or gas which has 90% and plus of methane content. And that is considered as a natural gas quality gas. It can be put into the grid and it can be transported throughout Europe because all the gas grid is connected in Europe. So theoretically, you can buy biomethane in Portugal and transport it all the way to Finland because the gas grid is connected, which is of course very efficient for the transport of this renewable energy because you don't have to put it on a truck or on any other way of means of transport. It's quick and it's controlled by authorities, so it's safe. The outputs of all this system is that you end up with biomethane, which can be used as an alternative to natural gas. So again, for instance, in your stove. Or it can be compressed or liquefied and used as a transport fuel. So then we have bio-CNG or bio-LNG. ACT has delivered more than 7 terawatt-hours of biomethane since 2018 when we entered the biomethane business. And of course, as a solutions provider, we have to be on track with market factors and current developments on the market with biomethane. There are 3 main things that affect the market with biomethane. The first one is that we are currently seeing quite a limited availability of biomethane. So we have increasing demand and we have quite a limited supply. But luckily, we have a now new target at the EU level, which was made public in the Repower this spring, I think, Repower EU, and that is 35 billion cubic meters until year 2030. Currently, the production is 3.2 billion cubic meters. You can see here that in 2020, this is the biomethane, this is biogas. So in 2020, we had 32. And the target is basically tenfold until 2030. I think that really says a lot about how the EU is recognizing the importance of biomethane and its important role in the circular economy and getting independent from fossil fuels from countries where we don't want our gas to come from. Another important market factor is the feedstock. So generally, we have feedstocks which are considered better quality and a little bit worse quality. That's, for instance, the energy crops that I already mentioned. And this gives you the price of the final product, biomethane. So the better feedstock, the higher price of the biomethane. And here you have examples of the feedstock and what is like the percentage in Europe regarding the availability. A third thing that plays quite a big role in the price of the final product is where it's produced in Europe. So we have different countries with different regulations and different subsidy schemes. So for instance, Spain, these are, by the way, countries that currently produce biomethane. So for instance, Spain has no subsidy scheme. So the gas tends to be more expensive than, for instance, from France, where the subsidy is quite high. But in the same time, Spain has cheaper feedstock that the producers need to purchase in many cases than, for instance, in France. So this really, to get to the final price, you need to do a little bit of analysis. You also need to check what are the conditions for the production in a different country. And then in the end, you need to think of what kind of corporate goals you have and what kind of biomethane you wish to have. And how this all plays with the corporate standards that we have around the world. So here I just put standards that are focusing on scope 1, or that specifically mention biomethane or biogas in the rules that they offer. The general rule is that when you have a physical gas, that means that you really have a biomethane plant on site, or you have a direct pipeline from which you can take the pure biomethane, so you know it's only biomethane, it's not fossil natural gas. You can use it for any of these standards to reduce your scope 1. When you're focused on the market-based approach, that means that you're using the market-based instruments to reach your targets. There it gets a little bit more complicated, and generally you need to do a little bit of digging, a little bit of analysis of if the biomethane certificates are fit to lower your scope 1. It's a little bit different for every single standard. CDP, for instance, says that if you want to use biomethane and take it from the grid, you need to buy certificates. Greenhouse Gas Protocol, on the other hand, does not mention biomethane certificates in any way. The situation with the GHG protocol is that until 2019, we had a little bit of a guidance on how to use biomethane in certificates. Then this part of the GHG protocol was taken out because the World Resources Institute started working on specialized guidance on biogenic emissions, which would also cover biomethane. This autumn, the new guidance was presented to specialized focus groups, and I think by the end of the year we should know of how GHG protocol is looking at biomethane and biomethane certificates. What I think is important here also to mention is that biomethane has been recognized as a fuel which has zero emissions under the EU ETS. We have a framework for this at the EU level, but every member state in the US can choose their own national guidelines for this. So it can be a little bit different in every country. So again, if you want to use biomethane for EU ETS obligations, so you don't have, if you use biomethane, basically you don't have to buy EUA allowances. You need to first check within your country what the specific rules are. Biomethane can also be used in transport requirements that are based in Renewable Energy Directive, same in the UK. For obligations in the US, the low carbon fuel standard in California also allows for the use of physical biomethane, as well as some other state transport schemes. So, and what you can actually do and claim when you use biomethane. I think it's important to fit biomethane into your overall kind of story as a company. So you really need to think of how to put it in your reporting in a way that it makes sense for you. So what we always advise our clients is to think of your natural gas consumption and how you can replace it with biomethane. If you can replace a certain percentage of biomethane, that's great. The rest, if you cannot, you can compensate with good quality carbon credits. I'm going to give you a little bit of an example how this works. So you take your greenhouse gas emissions from gas combustion in your facility or in your office. You multiply it by using the German emission factor for natural gas here in Germany. And you end up on a number, let's say 10,000 tons of CO2 emissions from gas consumption per year. You can replace that with biomethane, which basically gives you the claim to say that the gas that you're using in your facilities, offices, is green. And then the claim can look, for instance, like this. So you can say we have replaced X% of our gas consumption with biomethane produced from renewable sources, resulting in the elimination of 10,000 tons of CO2. Or our facilities use biomethane produced in Europe from waste and residues. Again, what we always recommend is think about it, how it fits into your story, how it fits into your reporting, what you really want to claim, what you want to tell your the readers of your sustainability report, and how it fits in the strategy and with the standards that you follow. So I again want to end with a message. So if there's one thing that I would like you to take away from this session, I would really like you to think of biomethane as a part of the solution. It's not the only solution, but it's a good way how to replace fossil natural gas. It's important to communicate and know that it comes from renewable sources that are mostly waste and residues, and it originates in Europe. And it very well fits into the story of circular economy. Yeah, so we are here for the lunch break. So if you want to talk to me or my colleague Andreas, we are here. And I'll be happy to take any questions during the panel. Thank you.